Welcome to our Socratic conversation, which is live streamed in X and will be posted in X and also in YouTube. So if you missed the opportunity today, you can catch up on X or YouTube in the future. Welcome to this interesting conversation today with one of the protagonists of European cardiology. You know, for 40, 50 years, we've been sitting on traditional risk factors identified in the Framingham study. What we are learning is that these traditional risk factors are extremely important, but they only explain 50% of cardiovascular disease. The remaining 50% is to a large extent related to what we call exposome, exposure to pollution, to infectious, to depression, and risk factors which are independent of traditional risk factors. So today we have the opportunity to give a new look to cardiovascular prevention, focusing on the growing role of exposure. And as I told you, we will discuss this growing role of exposure to environmental risk factors with one of the protagonists of this area of cardiovascular medicine. Our protagonist today is Thomas Münzel, and I'm hosting this dialogue with Lina Badimon, Executive Editor of the European Heart Journal. And together in this dialogue, we will unveil this important new topic of cardiovascular medicine, risk factors beyond Framingham, and we will do it again with a protagonist. Lina, please, can you introduce our guest, and let's start this fascinating dialogue.
With pleasure. Indeed, it's for me a great pleasure to introduce Professor Thomas Münzel. Professor Münzel is a German cardiologist and vascular biologist, internationally recognized for his pioneering work on environmental risk factors and cardiovascular disease. He's Senior Professor Emeritus of Cardiology at the University Medical Center Mainz and serves as Chairman of the Task Force on Environment and Sustainability of the European Society of Cardiology. He received formative scientific training in vascular biology and physiology at the Institute of Physiology at the University of Fribourg under Eberhard Bassenge, which shaped his long life focus on endothelial function, nitrate tolerance, nitric oxide signaling, and oxidative stress. Following clinical and academic appointments in Fribourg and Hamburg, and a research fellowship at Emory University in Atlanta, he was appointed chair and director of cardiology at the University Medical Center Mainz, where he served from 2004 to 2023. At Mainz, Professor Münzel was a founding investigator of the Gutenberg Health Study, one of Europe's largest population-based cardiovascular cohorts, and co-founder of the Center for Thrombosis and Hemostasis. A major clinical legacy is the nationwide implementation of the chest pain unit network in Germany. His research integrates mechanistic, clinical, and population-based approaches to elucidate how air pollution, transportation noise, and other environmental stressors drive cardiovascular disease. This is a brief biosketch of Professor Tom Münzel. And now we will start asking him some questions in this dialogue that will allow us to really know him better as a person, as a cardiologist, and also as a scientist. So your first studies were on coronary artery disease and nitroglycerin tolerance around 1985. Was this what attracted you to cardiology, or was something else?
Yeah, so the important point was that, first of all, my average grade in school was very bad. And so I didn't get a study place immediately in medicine. And then I decided to make male nurse training. Then I was a urology nurse for a total of 5 years. And then I started medicine in Freiburg in 1979. And having finished that, I had a thesis where I had to measure the diameter of coronary artery with and without diltiazem. So how strong is the calcium antagonist diltiazem dilating large coronary arteries? So it was not very attractive, the title per se, but I had a very, very strong, let's say, physiologist taking care for me. And he got me interested in pathophysiology because he was from Bassange's lab, which is actually was hunting EDRF, so endothelium-derived relaxing factor. What kind of chemical nature is this compound? And then I decided in the biblical age of 30 to do research. So I was 2 years in this Bassange lab, and it was really outstanding. So giving me the direction or the interest in research. And I had the luck to learn, let's say, excellent, experimental setups, the chronically instrumented dock, for example, where the docks were equipped with catheters in the carotid artery to measure blood pressure and heart rate. They had coronary artery catheters to infuse acetylcholine. They had crystals around the coronary artery to measure large coronary artery diameter. They had a flow probe to measure coronary artery flow, and they had also, let's say, a flow probe around the aorta to measure cardiac output. So these completely equipped docs helped me to understand coronary and systemic physiology, pathophysiology, and pharmacology. And we had a wonderful colleague from Canada, Duncan Stewart. He was the guy pushing this nitroglycerin concept. Why do we get nitrate tolerance? Why is the patient getting used to nitrates, losing the efficacy? And you know, if you do basic science, you always need a translation to clinical, let's say, implications. And he was perfect because he was telling me always why I need to understand as a future cardiologist what happens. And he was a great teacher, and we were very successful with these studies and had several circulation papers dealing with the topic of nitrate tolerance and the reversal of tolerance, for example, by N-acetylcysteine.
Right. But in reality, to move from nephrology to cardiology, was anything personal involved?
Yeah, so I think my problem was that my father died early in the age of 55. So he was a heavy smoker, like my mother also, and he had sudden cardiac death. And this actually was a crucial point to decide at the end to study cardiology. I wanted to find out what the reason is for sudden cardiac death, and so cardiology was the logic consequence.
Right. So, well, you have already introduced to us your relation with Professor Bassange. So he was your mentor. You believe you think that he's your first mentor. And can you tell us what did you learn from him as a mentor?
Yeah, so actually he was the boss of the lab. So, you know, if you are the boss, you are traveling a lot and you are more close to other people in the lab. But this was an excellent group. So, for example, Rudi Busse, maybe you know him, an excellent physiologist, was that time there. Uli Pohl, who was later the chief in physiology in Munich. We had Jürgen Holz and this group together. Everybody was a specialist in cellular physiology, in animal experiments, and this was really forming me and getting a great knowledge about physiology and pathophysiology, and which was also exciting that Professor Holz developed this pacing model also in Freiburg, that you stimulate a dog with a heart rate of 270 for 2 weeks, and then you have the complete heart failure clinical phenotype. And then we were doing infusion, and that time also the atrial natriuretic factor was discovered. So we were treating dogs with ANF infusion. We're looking for catecholamine release rates, for blood pressure responses and everything. So this was really something helping me later to understand, for example, why atrial fibrillation is causing cardiomyopathy. And if you stop the pacing in the dog, he's getting within 2 weeks a complete normal heart function. And like it is in a patient, if you make an ablation, you get a normal heart function within, let's say, 2 or 3 months or so.
Well, this tells us how important it is to be trained in an environment of scientific value, right? Because you learn forever, not for the things you do at the moment, but for the future work. So then you were switching to the clinics for internal medicine training, and your interest shifted to heart failure. Then you had already knowledge in the experimental situation, but then you moved to internal medicine. How did you do that, and why did you do that?
So actually, I was moving to the cardiology division of Professor Just. He was the chief in cardiology, and we call his Oberarzt was Helmut Drexler. And Helmut Drexler, I think most of you will know him very well. So he was in his initial times an expert in heart failure, and later he switched to endothelial function. So when I was visiting him in the clinics for the first time, he opened the refrigerator, and there were hundreds of ANF ampoules. And then he said to me, "This is your protocol. So you have to infuse ANF in heart failure patients. And this would be the first time in Maine. And we will see what the results will be. But you can be sure if there is something going that we can publish that at least in circulation." And so this was a brutal protocol for me because I had to infuse ANF for 24 hours in patients. And, you know, if you get ANF as an infusion, you are peeing and you're losing sodium. And the question of the study was, do we see vascular tolerance if we chronically infuse a peptide? Because usually you have downregulation of the receptor and it's losing efficacy. But the problem was you have to reload the lost volume in order to say something about vascular tolerance. And so I was measuring every 4 hours the hemodynamics and the volume loss and the sodium loss, and then I had to reinfuse the lost volume. And then I was always measuring hemodynamics. So this was a brutal story. And at the end, it came out that there was no tolerance to ANF. And this was a study with 10 patients. It was an open study, but nevertheless, because it was interesting, we could publish that in circulation. So this was a big success. Yeah. Now, if you do an open study with 10 patients, it's hard to publish that nowadays in circulation. And you know, then immediately when the study was finished, he had another study, ANF degradation inhibitor, which was a compound from Pfizer, candoxatrilat, and you know, neprilysin inhibitors that time as a substance alone was having some effect, but the effect was not strong enough. So we speculated that time it was in the early 90s, it has maybe to be combined with an ACE inhibitor or AT1 receptor blocker. And this came out at the end with sacubitril and valsartan, this powerful substance. So I was very happy to be in this campaign, vascular drug campaign in the very early stage involved. And the third big study was that we were thinking about why is a patient with heart failure not able to do exercise. And everybody would say, of course, it's clear because his ejection fraction is impaired. He has 25%, and this actually is the reason why he cannot exercise enough. But that time there was more interest in the periphery, so smooth muscle and the skeletal muscle, which was very high topic. So I was doing muscle biopsies in hundreds of patients and normal subjects, and we were comparing the muscle composition of heart failure patients and healthy people. And the interesting result was in the end, which is maybe also easy to understand. If you have heart failure, you don't do sports enough, you have a deconditioning of your muscle, and this will change the mitochondria power. So the power to produce energy is impaired. And so the simple message, if you want, was if you are having heart failure, it's good to do exercise, which was, let's say, a change in the philosophy, how to treat heart failure, not to go to bed and stay in bed, and this is good for your heart. Leave your bed and do exercise, and this is good for quality of life. And at the end, we learned it will also prolong your life. So this was maybe the most important story, very simple, Simple story, but very important implications.
So I see that you have in front of you, as if it were yesterday, the papers you published in the 90s. So this is very good. I'd like to ask you, what is the most important scientific contribution? You already said this last one, but is there any other thing that you think made you think that is your most important contribution to the area of heart failure we're talking now? So this one is important. I mean, you contributed also to the concept of the treatment that is presently being used. And also, what about the disappointments with the atrial natriuretic factor?
Yeah, so these were huge studies with disappointing results, and at the end, let's say the large trials went along with our observations that ANF is not a therapeutic agent, for example, also in patients with acute left heart decompensation. So what I did with respect to nitrate tolerance, that we did also translational studies in humans where we could demonstrate that the time course for tolerance development was the same in animals and in patients. You know, if you start a nitrate infusion in dogs, you have seen that you get an initial maximum dilation of the coronary arteries, and then over 3 to 5 days, the diameter comes down to back to baseline. So there's a complete tolerance development in large coronary artery conductance vessels. And then we were able to show with a quite complicated protocol that the same happens in humans. So this was, let's say, with respect to coronary artery physiology or pathophysiology or pharmacology, my most important paper, and also published in Czech then.
Right. So we would like to ask you also, you have mentioned already Professor Vassange, but who are your other mentors? Because you have been traveling, you were in America, you had collaborations with scientists from Canada, but who do you believe were important for you to help you in your career in those years?
You know, I told you initially my problem was that I was pretty aged when I was starting with medicine. And when I finished my medical study, I was already 30. And then I decided, when I finished my internal medicine training, doing some research abroad. And at that time, I knew David Harrison in Atlanta at the Emory University. And the interesting aspect that time was that I think it was the only lab worldwide where we could measure superoxide, oxidative stress in arteries. And actually, when I was writing a proposal for the German Research Institute to get a grant for David Lab, so he was pinning down everything excellent, what happens, which was happening in the future. So he proposed, if you give chronically nitric oxide, you activate counter-regulatory systems which are eating up nitric oxide, and that's superoxide. And so he said the major mechanism of nitrate tolerance is oxidative stress. And then we started treating, in this case, rabbits with nitroglycerin patches, and then we were measuring blood pressure, heart rate, and vascular function. And we have seen immediately just 3 days of nitrate treatment causes endothelial dysfunction. This was very exciting. And we've also seen, using this Lucicenin methodology, I don't know whether you're aware of that, this was the initial approach to measure superoxide in arteries, was strikingly increased. And if you have the interaction between nitric oxide and superoxide, you get peroxynitrite, and peroxynitrite, of course, is a very strong inhibitor of other vasodilator enzymes, for example, like the prostacyclin synthase. You get tyrosine nitration of the enzyme, which causes an inactivation of this very important vasodilatory enzyme. And so the other point was, when I was in David Lab, this was an incredible, powerful group. So Kathy Grindling was there. She discovered the NADPH oxidase. Then we had Bradford Burke and Marshall Runge and Russell Medford. These are outstanding physiologists and cardiologists together. And what impressed me very much was that these people are working together. This made them so powerful. So I would say in Germany, if you have something, you hide it and keep it for yourself. Maybe not the case anymore, but that time maybe. But this made Emory so strong, and you know this NADPH oxidase was involved in almost everything, and then I was very happy to demonstrate that this enzyme is also a very important superoxide donor in nitrate tolerance. And what we have also seen, which was a very important topic in David Harrison's laboratories, was the uncoupling of the nitric oxide synthase. So nitric oxide usually is getting produced by eNOS, and this has strong vasodilatory and anti-inflammatory actions. And if you get an uncoupling, then it's producing superoxide instead of nitric oxide. And so this uncoupling concept I was taking then also to Germany, building up my research lab and being pretty successful.
Right, this is a extraordinary career and expertise. So now we are going to pass to Filippo, who is going to be asking about your European times when you came back to Europe.
Well, Thomas, first, thank you for accepting our invitation. Please let me note that you noted that when you started, your dream was circulation, was to publish in circulation. And also my dream at that time was to publish in circulation. But perhaps today, younger colleagues may have other dreams to keep in mind. But let's come back to your...
Let's say it frankly. Nowadays is European Heart Journal.
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure.
At least one of the dreams for a young cardiologist.
I think I didn't publish in circulation for 15 years, so just European Heart Journal, Filippo.
I know that, Tom, I'm joking. Now,
Yep.
Back to Mainz. You started this very interesting Gutenberg health study in Mainz. And also you have been the founder there of the Thrombosis and Hemostasis Center. Can you tell us more about these two important initiatives?
Yeah, so this was a really powerful development. You know, when I was moving from Hamburg, Eppendorf to Mainz, that we had Professor Blankenberg there, and he was involved in some prospective cohort trials. And then he told me, oh, he has an idea about a new study. He wants to initiate the Gutenberg Health Study. And I was listening to his concept, and I said, oh, this is perfect. What I want to include into your concept are endothelial function measurements, because I still believe endothelial function is a very important biomarker with prognostic implications. So if you make a prospective cohort trial and looking what is responsible for cardiovascular dysfunction in the Rhine-Main area, also close to Frankfurt, then we have to include this parameter. And he made it really that within half a year, we got a sponsoring from Boehringer Ingelheim, about 5 million euro to initiate this Gutenberg Health Study. And this was an incredible achievement, let's say. And at the end, it was a ticket for many successful initiatives, like you said, for the Center of Thrombosis and Hemostasis. So we initiated, let's say, an anticoagulation initiative in Mainz, so where we actually treating patients needing coumadin on a computer-based approach, like the Netherlands, for example, with their thrombosis centers. But we also were writing a proposal where we included the new compounds, all the new anticoagulants, and nobody knew at that time whether they are successful or not. And so the concept per se was so interesting that we got this Center for Thrombosis and Hemostasis for a duration of 10 years and a total, let's say, grant volume of 50 million euro, which was really powerful. The other point from the clinical situation, we got the drug-eluting stents, and we had atrial fibrillation ablation, and we had also the new heart valves. So I was in a lucky situation that I was pretty strong in the clinic. So we had a lot of a powerful group. Maybe you know Stefan von Bardeleben. He's one of the valve experts. So we were developing nicely in the clinics, but also with respect to research. And this is something which is pretty unusual because the people are saying you are very successful in clinics, but your performance in basic science is very bad, or you're a very good basic scientist, then the clinic is not running well. So I was in a lucky situation to have in every part very, very powerful people. And so these big consortia participation gave us, let's say, very strong financial support, also for the basic science part. And then I realized after a couple of years that there is a problem in Mainz because the airport in Frankfurt is very close. And I was getting nuts because this airport really stressed me. Even it was good to have the airport very close, because if you want to fly to somewhere, you are there in half an hour. But the noise stress from 5 o'clock in the morning until 11 p.m. in the night, this was really horrific.
Yeah. Well, now let's move to the core of our dialogue today. But first, thank you for sharing your personal experience. We had more than 40 dialogues with world leaders in cardiology. And when we come to their academic experience, you told us and others told us that what really was key in starting your academic career was the international exposure and the identification of good mentors. And I think that this is a strong message for our younger colleagues. If you want to develop a successful career, you need enthusiasm, resilience, because it's not an easy career, international exposure, and you must identify good mentors. So thank you, Thomas, for reminding our younger colleagues that this is really the way to go if you want to start a successful academic career. But now let's come to your favorite baby, your recent, in the last several years, your interest has been attracted by environmental risk factors, which for many years have been neglected. Again, we've been sitting for decades on Framingham risk factors. They are important, but we cannot limit our interest to traditional risk factors because there's a lot in addition. Can you tell us more what triggered your interest in environmental risk, including interest not only in air pollution, but also noise and light pollution? We will see with you, I'm sure, that pollution is much more than air pollution. Thomas, tell us.
Yeah, so the interesting point was that the reason why I was being interested in noise pollution first was that I was moving within Mainz, let's say 2 kilometers to the right. And this actually meant that I think it was the 1st June 2006. I know this so exactly because the World Championship in 2006 started, where Germany at the end in this soccer World Championship was reaching the 3rd place. But the problem was that we had many aircrafts day and night, because there was a championship, you have extra flights the entire 24 hours. So after 2 weeks, just moving to a new house, I told my wife, so that's it. We leave the house. We cannot sustain this incredible noise. And in 2006, then I was going to the internet and searching noise and cardiovascular disease, and there was almost nothing. It's actually like it was also with nitrate tolerance. It's very important in science that you pick topics where you don't have too many competitors. Yeah, and then I was seeing, okay, there are some people proposing that noise stress can cause cardiovascular disease. And then actually in 2011, when there was a new runway in Frankfurt, and the result was that airplanes are going directly over my house, then I say, so that's it. I will enter now noise research heavily. And actually, I acquired a noise from Düsseldorf Airport, aircraft noise. And we got a nice protocol to measure vascular function, endothelial function before and after noise exposure. We measured stress hormones and everything, and we were using medical students, exposed them 30 or 60 times to nighttime aircraft noise. And the outstanding observation was just one night of aircraft noise increases stress hormone levels. This was not very surprising, but we could also measure endothelial dysfunction. So flow-dependent dilation went down, let's say, from 10% to 8.5%. And when we gave acutely vitamin C, we could correct this endothelial dysfunction. So the message was, you have nighttime stress, you cannot sleep enough, you're waking up a lot, you have the increased catecholamine stress hormone levels, and you have a high degree of oxidative stress in your vasculature. And then we were checking for patients with already established cardiovascular disease, when we have seen this is much more pronounced. So when you have already CVD and you have noise in addition to that, then you are prone to develop more endothelial dysfunction. And the other important observation was you're not getting used to the noise. So when you had noise before and getting another exposure, the worsening of endothelial dysfunction was strongly aggravated. So this was, let's say, pretty easy, the clinical part of our translational experiments. And I must say, we are the only group worldwide doing this translational experiments. And then we did aircraft noise. After aircraft noise, we did railway noise, and now we were doing car noise, road noise, and this actually was just accepted in cardiovascular research, and so it's getting published pretty soon. So we see it's not specific for aircraft or railway or road noise, and it's always the same mechanism. Vitamin C can improve endothelial dysfunction. Then I said, I want to know the enzymes being involved in this process. And then we developed an animal model exposing mice to aircraft noise. And we have seen, interestingly, the same results like in the healthy humans. So one night of aircraft noise was sufficient to make endothelial dysfunction in mice, as established, for example, by giving acetylcholine to the aorta. We have seen that the blood pressure goes up, stress hormone were strongly increased, and actually we could nicely reproduce everything what we've seen in humans in our animals. And then, of course, we were fighting for mechanisms. And so what we've seen in these mouse experiments, that oxidative stress goes up in the heart, in the vasculature, but also in the brain, which was deeply concerning. And we've seen that one of the most important superoxide donor was the NADPH oxidase, and it was not, let's say, Kathy Grindling's NADPH oxidase. It was NOx2, which is the phagocytic NADPH oxidase. So when you have noise stress, you're getting, let's say, invasion of these inflammatory cells into the heart, into the brain, and also into the vasculature. These make superoxide, and then you get peroxynitrite, and then you have severe vascular dysfunction. And of course, it was exciting to see when we have NOx2 knockout animals, when you get rid of the superoxide producing cells, then all cardiovascular side effects of noise are gone. So this was the first important message. The second important message, of course, what is more important is a daytime noise or nighttime noise. So we exposed the animals during the wake phase and the sleeping phase to noise. And we have clearly seen when you expose mice, which are sleeping during the day, to noise, then they get severe endothelial dysfunction, a very strong increase in stress hormones and cardiovascular damage. But when you are doing this during the awake phase, you don't see anything. So this actually was helping us to propose the concept that, in particular, nighttime noise, so frequent interruption of sleep or too short sleep, is a very important, let's say, trigger of cardiovascular events in response to transportation noise. And then we had also patient data showing the same. Nighttime noise was making high blood pressure, daytime noise not. When you're looking for vascular stiffness, nighttime noise is doing that, daytime noise not. So I think the concept is pretty clear that the interruption of sleep is one of the most important stressors leading to cardiovascular disease, which means stroke, ischemic heart disease, heart failure, arrhythmia, but also unfortunately to dementia. Yeah, so we see that if you get currently exposed to noise, there are strong data from Denmark that dementia, especially Alzheimer's disease, develops, and this fits nicely to our observation that 4 days of noise are already sufficient to strongly increase superoxide production in the brain. And then, of course, we checked with our noise models all cardiovascular risk factors. So what happens if animals have hypertension? What happens if they have heart failure? What happens if they have a myocardial infarction? And then in addition, a noise exposure, everything was getting substantially worse. So the concept is that noise-induced cardiovascular disease shares the same, let's say, cellular pathways like traditional risk factors. We also investigated diabetic animals. So we have seen always a worsening of the cardiometabolic situation. And of course, this led us to conclude if you are a vulnerable person, if you have already established cardiovascular disease, that this stressor will actually strongly aggravate let's say, the disease already existing.
Thank you, Thomas. Very interesting and forgotten for many years, this important issue. Well, it is interesting that mice and humans exposed to air traffic had a detrimental effect on vascular function, while pigs, as shown by Hans Trappe in Germany, and humans exposed to music have an improvement of vascular function. So the message is very clear: less noise and more music for our cardiovascular system. But now let's come to another pollution, which is extremely important, which is air pollution. What is the main cause of air pollution?
Yeah, so the main cause of air pollution is fossil fuel burning. So burning of gas, oil, and coal. And this actually was a paper published by Jos Lelyfeld from Mainz, is killing per year 8.3 million people. So this is a quite huge number. And if you look, because they always group ozone and PM 2.5 together, that ozone is killing 400,000 people and PM 2.5, so the size of the air pollutant is killing 7.9 million. And the important point is in this paper published British Medical Journal, he also showed when you make an acute phase out of fossil fuels that you can save 5.1 million lives a year. So this is a huge number. And the important point is this is not just the observation from Professor Lelyfeld in Mainz. We see more and more that the numbers are coming together because you have to consider these are in part real-time measurements of PM 2.5 or air pollution concentrations. On the other hand, there's a lot of modeling, calculating at the end the excess mortality. So the important point is to understand how air pollution works. So for example, when we inhale polluted air, the ultrafine particle, the very small particle, less than 0.1 micrometer, they can enter the brain directly via the olfactoric nerve. And in the brain, they can cause neuroinflammation, but they also can activate the so-called HPA axis, so the hypothalamic pituitary axis, which at the end leads to an activation of the sympathetic nervous system, and to an increase in cortisone levels. The larger particles are getting inhaled into the lungs, and then they can transmigrate into the bloodstream, taken up by the blood vessels, and then causing inflammation, oxidative stress, platelet activation, endothelial dysfunction. So actually they can, if you want, damage every part in our body. And this is, of course, especially, let's say, vulnerable for the brain and for the heart. So the important point is when you're getting asked, what is a particle? Then it's always a carbon core, and the size of the carbon core determines the power of the particle to transmigrate through tissue. So ultrafines are getting easily through tissue, PM 2.5, not that easy. But the important point is also what is sitting on the particle. So we have transition metals, we have endotoxins, maybe also the coronavirus, what was believed to sit on this air pollution particles, and these stuff sitting on the particle is at the end responsible for the toxicity of this air pollutant. And so a good example is, for example, if you compare air pollutant from a Swiss elm with air pollution from Beijing, then you may ask what is more toxic? Is this the air pollution from the Alm in Switzerland or from Beijing? And the interesting point is the toxicity of the air pollutant from the Swiss Alm is much more toxic because it's coming from this nitrite containing, we call it Gülle here in Germany, and this is especially toxic, and so this is important to know that which is sitting on the particle at the end is responsible whether it has more or less severe cardiovascular side effects.
Thank you very much. Thank you for clarifying these important issues. Thomas, very briefly, what about light pollution? Do we have a problem there as well?
Yeah, I think so. We know that, for example, that the artificial light is changing our circadian rhythm, which is known to be an important factor for future cardiovascular disease. And there are some publications also in your journal who nicely showed, for example, for Hong Kong, if you are exposed to light pollution to a certain level, that you are developing a more severe cardiovascular disease. So I think the important point is what we have to consider is this topic of co-exposure. So for example, when you have aircraft, you have exposure to noise, but also to ultrafine particles in large amounts. When you have exposure to cars, you have NO2 and PM 2.5, but you also have the noise. And of course, living in a city means also you have the problem of light pollution. And these co-exposures are very important because they intensify the damage which is produced usually by one pollutant. So this is also, I think, the future of environmental research, that you're more and more trying to find out what the co-exposure issue is doing.
Right.
Thomas, let's come now to Lina, sorry. Please, let's come back to you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. You know, it's very interesting. I mean, we are running out of time and we have many more questions. What about plastics? Because this is a problem in the world. I mean, there are plastics everywhere. Now, I was reading the other day that if you think when you are drinking from a glass bottle that you will not be having plastics, you do have plastics as well. So what's your opinion and your knowledge about this?
Yeah, so the plastics is frightening on the one side. On the other side, I think it's still a black box. So we have written now several articles together also with Phil Endricken from Boston, who is one of the plastic experts. And for me, it's interesting to see with respect to animal experiment that plastics are causing inflammation. They activate radical-producing enzymes like the NADPH oxidase. And from this point of view, it's So easy to understand that plastics will be involved in cardiovascular disease, but the clinical data we have so far are not so strong. So we have this one New England Journal paper where they looked at the carotid artery and they realized if we have arteries which have also plastic in the plaque, that the likelihood in the future to get more cardiovascular events is 4 times increased. And if you don't have plastic, you are doing better in the future. But this is a little bit too easy for me. So it's from the concept. Yeah.
Okay, so what are the most important mitigation strategies cardiologists can recommend to their patients, right, to limit pollution damage?
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
So the important point is the politicians have to behave. Yeah. So for example, when we are talking about air pollution, we have very strong limits, which are published by the WHO. They were saying 5 microgram per cubic meter is the limit. Above these limits, you are getting sick. The interesting point, the US has 9 microgram per cubic meter, Australia 8, and I think New Zealand 10, but Europe has 25 microgram per cubic meter. So we have 5 times the level what the WHO is saying is healthy. So we have to bring the levels down. And I know for 2030, the European Union decided to bring down the level to 10 microgram per cubic meter. So because the politicians never behave, and I'm pretty sure that they will skip this level, you can do several things which may help you. So you can wear a face mask, for example, which is not very exciting because we don't want to do that anymore. We have enough from Corona. You can use special ventilators which are able to reduce PM 2.5 concentrations in the air, and or other filters which are very powerful. And for example, you can do exercise. Exercise is very important. We know it increases nitric oxide synthase expression. It's very, let's say, protective for the vasculature, but the problem is the outside concentration of the PM 2.5. So if the PM 2.5 concentration is too high, there are some studies also from South Korea nicely showing that you are running into your myocardial infarction. So you have to be careful. You have to measure the PM 2.5 concentrations on a regular basis. And there are actually apps available on the smartphone where you can ask them whether it's allowed to do exercise outside or not. So if the red light, stay in bed and don't move. And if it's green, you can go outside and do your sport. And this will help us in the future a lot.
Yeah, it's getting complicated. But
It's
what
getting complicated,
you said that politicians are our target, right? For the human beings, the politicians have to listen to us. But it's interesting to know that the 4 more important societies, like the European Society of Cardiology, the American Heart Association, the American the World Heart Federation that you already mentioned, and the American College have issued a document talking about the danger we are living through and how we have to work together. And there is a call to action. You have participated in this document. Do you think that documents like these, showing the unifying approach of the different scientific societies, will be of importance?
I think they are very, very important to show that we are thinking all in the same direction. We say also this is a call to action. And I'm pretty sure that it will help to tell the people more and more how important the environment is. And we have the data that every 5th cardiovascular death is due to the environment, which is a huge number. I think nobody knows that, and you have to always tell the people how important the environment is. But in my hands, the most important, let's say, maneuver we have to do, we have to include the environment into the guidelines. And that's why I'm very important. It's very important that I'm the chairman of the Task Force Environment and Sustainability, because I'm getting also involved in the prevention guidelines. And I think we have data enough now to include heat. We didn't talk about heat, which is getting a huge problem in the future. The heat islands in cities is very high temperatures, which kill massively people. air pollution and noise. These three, let's say, environmental stressors have to be accepted as environmental risk factors. And if we make this, the politicians cannot look aside. They have to take this up and accordingly take care that these environmental stressors are not endangering our life. So this is the most important
But with the
aim I have. Yeah.
thing in Davos, for example, everyone goes in a private jet, you know, so they don't share anything. So the pollution is going to be high and high because these politicians don't listen to anything. We have to do documents like the one you mentioned. Okay.
But you are right. Let me just say, if you look at COP 28, 29, and 30, so 70,000 people are flying to this kind of conferences, and the CEO is sometimes maybe the CEO of the oil producing company,
So,
which makes no sense. Yeah, these kind of conferences, I would say, make it online. That's a better approach.
okay, so something we have not discussed is the smoking, this new type of smoking that is beyond thermal. So the young people is taking this like if this is very healthy, and we have a problem there. What could you tell us about this?
So first of all, I have to tell you that I'm personally very much motivated in smoking research because my parents were heavy smokers. Both died at the age of 55, lung cancer and sudden cardiac death. So I know what harm tobacco cigarettes are doing. And what I'm seeing right now that these cigarette companies under the shield of harm reduction offer new products like e-cigarettes or heat-not-burn products or this snus or this nicotine pouches and saying this is some healthy or clean nicotine, what they call, which is in my hands not justified at all. In our recent article where Filippo was also a co-author, we informed the people what nicotine is doing. And actually, I'm pretty sure that, for example, e-cigarettes are not as toxic as tobacco cigarettes. They are not as harmful, but they are far from being harmless. You know, e-cigarettes were developed to help the smokers also to get rid of the smoking at all. But we see if you switch from tobacco cigarettes to e-cigarettes, then just 10% of the smokers make it at the end to quit smoking completely. And the problem I see is that these nicotine pouches and also the e-cigarettes are intoxicating our youth. You know, there's a very aggressive marketing and they target our children. And actually in Mainz we have a Children Academy of Health, and I'm the one responsible for the smoking part. And I must admit, I'm shocked that I sometimes see that 50% of the 12 to 13-year-old kids are smoking already nicotine-containing vapes. So this is incredible, and I see, like many others also. I was just in Brussels yesterday concerning taxation of the new nicotine products. Everybody sees the same, that this aggressive marketing of these products will bring us in trouble. And if you look for nicotine, which is highly addictive, like cocaine and heroin, it increases blood pressure. It increases heart rate. This is all stuff a cardiologist don't want to see. We want to reduce heart rate and we want to reduce blood pressure. It increases stress hormone levels. And I wonder why this is not branded as a drug. You know, if you try if you use nicotine replacement therapy, you have pretty low concentration of nicotine, for example, 4 milligram per liter. And this is branded as a drug, but when you take this other, let's say, nicotine pouches, 20 or 40 milligram per milliliter, this is branded as a consumable, which makes no sense at all. So we need a very strong taxation. High taxes mean prevention, especially that youth are buying it because they cannot afford it anymore. So we have to be very brutal to find this new pandemic, which is in my hands coming.
Developing. Well, thank you very much, Tom. I'm going to pass the word to Filippo to start finishing. It was a great pleasure to listen to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Thomas, for this wide vision and perspective we are sharing with us. If I'm well understood, of course, we have to involve our politicians. This is what we are trying to do with ESC. And EU, of course, must be heavily involved in this process. And in addition, and you wrote a beautiful review in the European Heart Journal some years ago. The title was Heart Healthy Cities. So these are indications very strong to our politicians in this regard. As doctors, also, we must develop mitigation strategies because waiting for politicians to act, I think that we should inform our patients that in addition to physical exercise and body weight control, they also must mitigate exposure to nicotine, which must be zero tolerance, but also to other forms of pollutions. Now, coming to the end of this very interesting dialogue, as I said initially, we want to unveil the human side of our famous colleagues, which is an inspiration for our younger colleagues. What about your hobbies, your personal life? I mean, after pollution and nitric oxide, and when you relax, what do you do to reduce the levels of pollution in your life?
Yeah, actually, like many of us, when I was chief in cardiology and doing a lot of research, I didn't have very much time to take care for my kids, you know. But now I have time to take care for my grandchildren. This is something which is very exciting to me, and I do this as much as I can. Even I must admit, the growing interest in the environment impedes me a little bit. So the other point is I love playing golf. You know, it's such a great game, and I decided already when in my next life I'm getting a golf pro because it's nothing nicer than to hit a ball well and it flies and flies and never stops. So this is giving me really a great experience. And the other point is, which I like to share with my wife also, is driving e-bikes. So not the normal bike, of course. I'm already more than 70. So biking, golfing, and grandchildren. So these are my three biggies, let's say, for the next 10 to 15 years, hopefully.
Well, thank you for these important messages. So our younger colleagues know how to develop not only a successful academic career, but also a successful life at large. Thank you, Thomas, for sharing with us this fascinating hour. Thank you, Lina, for hosting Thomas. And I remind you that our dialogues, of course, will continue, a dialogue every month. Next will be on the 26th of February. And as usual, will be another interesting dialogue. Please join us. Again, thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Lina.